My name is Helena Aksamit. I came to England 1st of September 1950 through all the journey from Russia to Persia. That time it was Persia, not Iran, India, Africa, and I landed at least in England. And 11th of February 1940, a Russian army came to our houses and took us by force and take us all in cattle wagons to Siberia. And then, when you know itself, when the German army started going to Russia, they wanted the help. So Russia said if anybody helped them, there was Polish government on exile in London, and they got an agreement to let all the people Polish out of the Russia if they will help them to fight with the German. So all the aliens like English and American agree with this, and that's what's happened. They let us out of Russia. We came to the Caspian Sea, to Pahlavi, to Iran, I mean Persia then. From Persia, we've been in Tehran about a year and a half. Then they moved us to Persian Gulf. And we've been there, I don't remember how long, but we've been quite a bit. In 1942, we landed in Karachi. And then from Karachi, we went to India near Kolhapur, in a camp called Valivade, and we stayed there till war was over. And then from there, when the war was over, the family was united, whoever had somebody in Polish army, when Russia let us out, and they went to England to join the families. We didn't have a close family. My father's brother was in the army, but he wasn't close enough to join us. So then in 1947, India got independent, and they said, we don't want those people in here, take them out, and you go away. All the English people has to go as well. So they find another camp for us in English, like colony, Uganda. And they move us from there to Uganda. So we again cross by the Indian Ocean to Mombasa. And from Mombasa, we went by train to Kenya, to Nairobi. And from Nairobi, we went landing in a village like a camp near Victoria Lake. And we stayed there till we come to England. I came first to a camp called Istmo, yeah. And then I worked in the round trees in chocolate. And because my father's brother was settled in Leeds, so we found them. So I came to see him, and then I found myself a husband, got married, and that's it. Well, it mean a lot, because my children was going to school first in here, learn the Polish language in here, learn all the dances and everything what's traditional in here, like Easter, tradition Easter, like it used to be in Poland, and Christmas and everything. So it's like another Poland for me in here, like a little Poland, but I left before war. When we came first in here, it was very hard for us, because we've been all the time foreigners. It was hard to get a job, because English people was the first one to get a job. And it was very hard, so that's why we just settled down wherever we could and worked hard for it.
So I'm Teresa Aksamit Hollingworth. Well, we were taught Polish was our first language at home, so obviously that's what we spoke at home, and then from a very young age started here at the Polish school from 5. Started school, so did what was then O-level, GCSE and A-level, and then came back at 25 to start teaching again. And here I've stayed, and now my children are here, so we just keep the traditions going, and Easter and Christmas wouldn't be the same without the culture, the Polish tradition. That's what we do. It's changed in so much as the kids then were all born here, and our generation, for example, spoke quite well in Polish. Then our children, my children, for example, won't speak as well as I do, but they're still quite good. But now the children that are coming from Poland, obviously, Polish is their first language, so they do speak it extremely well, and that affects the ultimate examinations everybody takes. But then it hits the other way for them because their English isn't possibly as strong. I think the Poles who were here before came for a different reason. They had no choice. They were forced to leave their home. So for them, this centre and what they built was a part of Poland, like my mum said. The new Poles who are coming now come for economic reasons. So their whole view of this place is completely different. It's just a place to come where there are other Poles, and they have a home in Poland and potentially will go back there, although some of them will stay. So their probably perception of this place is totally different. They don't see it in the way I do or my mum does. It's very sentimental to us, whereas I think to them it takes on a completely different meaning because they've come for different reasons.
My name's Susanna Savitska. My married surname is Green. I've actually kept my maiden name, given it's very much Polish, and I think that's very important, especially given that my grandparents strove so adamantly to bring me up in the Polish Catholic faith, but also with the culture, that I keep my Polish identity. And I myself am a doctor, and I think it's only right that I kept it for all the work my parents have put in on me. I am the the wife of the chairman here in the Polish community in Leeds, and I work quite closely in the committee. I'm also the treasurer of the Polish school for my sins, and I also run the Girl Guides group here in Leeds in order to ensure and enable young people to take part in activities and keep the culture alive. My history, or my family history, is very dear to me. Both sets of my grandparents were political refugees from the Second World War, both from different parts of Poland, and each has their own story. This is their story. My grandfather and grandmother, who you can see here in a picture with me, were from near one of the first, or the second, capital of Poland, Krakow. My grandfather was born in 1904 and actually studied to be a teacher. He met my grandmother, Monica, who was also born in the 1900s, in 1909. They got together in 1933, and when the war broke out, they were both teaching in Krakow. My grandfather was a parachutist who jumped in Arnhem in 1944. As for my grandmother, she worked in the underground movement in Krakow called the Armia Krajowa. Both came to Britain as political refugees, initially in camps, and then set up homes in Birmingham, where my grandmother was one of the first headmistresses of the community, the school that was set up there. To the end of her days, my grandmother was very adamant, and she died in 1986, that it was important for us to be brought up not only as Catholics but in the Polish traditions. I've got a picture here of when I was baptised. Well, actually, I think it might even be my brother. There's a blue ribbon with my grandparents. My father even went on to organise not only something which I believe, or something people may have heard of, which is the youth movement, the Cass and Pen. He was lead of that, but also courses with the Archbishop that was dear to us, Archbishop Wesoły, called Loreto. And these were courses of religious education for 2 weeks, often in Europe, meeting with other Poles. My grandfather finished his days, actually, and you can see me in my national costume, at one of there's very few, but there are some Polish nursing homes here in Britain. We actually just had the whole Children's Day for all the children in the whole of Britain there at the place on last Saturday. And that's Laxton Hall, where there's fantastic nuns who care for people in their older years, especially when they don't speak very little or they speak very little English. On my maternal side, I can even remember my great-grandmother. Not many people can meet them. My great-grandmother and great-grandfather were from what is now Belarus, but for those of you that don't know the history of Poland, that was at a point, an area where there was not Poland just after the First World War was Poland, and then was given to the Russians as part of the settlements. My grandmother was born or great-grandmother was born in 1902, and they were married in 1923. You can see here my great-grandmother with me back in 1987, in actually my godmother's wedding dress in the garden. This is the church near where my great-grandfather was born in Kremidów, and that is where my grandmother was born, my grandmother Stanisława, who again, without her and her teaching me Polish cooking and or speaking to me in Polish, teaching me to read, I have a great debt of gratitude to my grandmother. This is a postcard actually, and it shows what happened in the war, but my great-grandfather fought at Monte Cassino, or was part of the crew that went up afterwards. And this is a copy of the postcard he sent her from then. My grandmother always talked of sorrow during those years, especially during the war. They spent a lot of time learning to sew. They went through Siberia, where unfortunately my grandmother, who ended up with a stiff leg, developed gangrene in her leg, and the only way to save it was for her to be in plaster from head to foot. It was a very difficult time for them. I can't even talk about it easily without filling up with tears, remembering the stories of the concentration camps they were in. I remember going through photos where there were people absolutely starving to death. My grandmother then, when the amnesty was formed, got to India with her sisters. She's one of 5 sisters. One of the sisters, and not all the sisters remember this sister, died in Russia because of the coldness of the atmosphere. The story goes that they were then organised to go on transports, and the ship that was due to sail was supposed to sail to Mexico. However, my grandmother was still in hospital, and my great-grandmother wouldn't leave without all her children, separated at this time by from her husband. They eventually caught the next ferry, which brought them to Southampton, and then from there onto the camps here, and then initially actually in Birmingham, and this is what is really strange. They lived in the next road but one to the road my father's family lived in, and didn't even know they existed in the same. They literally rode after each other in Birmingham, and then they settled in Coventry. On my other side is my granddad, Leon. and this is him with his parents. They actually came from not far from Kremydów, a place called Bolesławów. He sort of escaped from Poland through Italy and ended up helping actually after the war more than anything, and got through with the army of General Anders back to Britain. He was just 19-18 when the war broke out, and his father told him, 17, he wasn't quite old enough to go into the war effort, and he was told to escape because they knew what would happen. The sad story is he never saw his parents again. He never saw his sister. He was left alone. But this is them on their wedding day. And they had 3 children. The first, who died shortly before childbirth, was born stillborn. My mother, who was born in 1954, and my uncle, who was born in 1960. My grandfather was awarded various medals for his effort in forming the community in Coventry. And my mother and uncle were very much, again, brought up in the Catholic faith. They went to Polish school, they took part in the guides. My mum, thanks to my godmother or my aunt, one of my grand sisters, Janina Przesmycka, she actually did a lot of the dancing in Coventry and kept the culture alive. If I can remind you back to the fact I talked about Loreto, this camp for kids or youngsters about Polish background, it was actually there my parents met back in 1973. They were then married 3 years later in Coventry. My mum, ever since, has worked very closely for the community in Birmingham. She does the flowers, she organises things in church. My father, I must admit, took a bit of more of a back burner after his younger years, but very much made sure that we took part in things, took us to camps, took us goodness knows where we wanted, as long as we kept it going. People never say history can repeat itself, but it does. I met my husband, who is also of Polish descent, Zygmunt, who was chairman here, actually on the revival of those religious courses. It just shows how life can go full circle. My uncle now has 3 girls who all speak Polish and go to Polish schools down south. And it's great when we meet up with all my cousins and able to speak Polish. I'm very thankful for that. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for them.